My name is Margaret Green. I am 72 years old, and I live in the quiet mountains of Colorado, USA. Before I begin this story, let me first say, if you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you won't miss any of my upcoming stories. And I would love to know from which part of the country you're watching from, so drop it in the comments before we continue. Now, let me take you straight to the moment when my whole life turned upside down. It was on a narrow mountain path. The sky was gray, the air thin, and the sound of birds echoed far below us. My husband, George, was walking beside me, his hand holding mine firmly. Behind us were my son, Daniel, and my daughter-in-law, Emily. I thought we were just out on a family hike. I thought it was a simple walk to enjoy the fresh mountain air. But I was wrong. So wrong. As George and I moved carefully along the edge of the path, the ground rough and slippery, I suddenly felt two strong hands shove me forward. It was so quick, so sudden that my scream was caught in my throat. I didn't even have time to ask why. I went flying. Beside me, George stumbled too, his body tumbling in the air. And in that single terrible moment I realized the truth. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. My son and my daughter-in-law had pushed us. We fell hard. My body hit the sharp rocks below, pain exploding through me, warm blood soaking my dress. My breath came shallow, my chest heavy. I could hardly move. I thought I was dying. But then, through the ringing in my ears, I heard George's voice. His lips close to mine, his breath weak but steady. "Don't move, pretend to be dead." I froze. I did exactly as he said, my body stiff, my eyes half closed. I could hear Daniel and Emily's footsteps above, their whispers faint but cruel. After a while, their voices faded, and they left. That was when George turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes were dark, full of something I had never seen before. And in a low whisper, trembling but clear, he revealed a truth, one far more terrible than the fall. "Margaret, there's something I never told you, something about Daniel, something about us." And right there, with blood dripping from his mouth, my husband began to tell me a secret that made my heart pound harder than the fall itself. Now let me take you back. Because to understand how I ended up bleeding at the bottom of that cliff, you need to know the beginning. I was born and raised in a small farming town in Kansas. Life was simple then. My father worked the land, and my mother cooked and cared for us. We didn't have much, but we had peace. I grew up believing in family, in loyalty, in kindness. That belief shaped me. At 19, I moved to Colorado to study teaching. That was where I met George. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that made you trust him right away. He wasn't perfect, no man is, but he was gentle. He used to carry my books, walk me to class, and wait outside when I worked late at the library. I fell in love quickly, maybe too quickly. Within a year, we were married. The first years were good. We lived in a small cabin near the mountains. I taught at the local school, while George worked in construction. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. Nights were long but sweet, filled with laughter and dreams. When Daniel was born, my whole world changed. He was such a beautiful baby, with his father's eyes and my smile. I promised myself I would give him everything I never had. But raising Daniel wasn't easy. He was quiet, always watching, always calculating. As a boy, he rarely smiled, and when he did, it often came with a sharp edge. He was smart, too smart sometimes. He learned quickly how to get what he wanted, not by asking, but by making others bend to him. Still, I loved him. A mother always does. When Daniel grew older, he went to college in Denver. That's where he met Emily. She was beautiful, sharp, and ambitious. From the first day he brought her home, something in me didn't feel right. She smiled too much, but her eyes stayed cold. She was polite to me, but her words often cut deeper than knives. I tried to warn Daniel. I told him to slow down, to think carefully before marrying her. But he didn't listen. He never listened. And so they married. For years, I tried to accept Emily, but she always found ways to keep Daniel away from us. She didn't like him visiting. She didn't like us calling. Little by little, we saw our son less and less. Then one summer, out of the blue, they suggested a family hike. It surprised me. Emily hated the mountains. She hated dirt, hated bugs, hated everything about nature. But she insisted it would be good for all of us. She even said she wanted to build new memories. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think maybe she had changed. So George and I agreed. We packed a small bag, put on our hiking boots, and followed them up the narrow trail. The higher we climbed, the more uneasy I felt. Emily kept whispering to Daniel, their heads close together, their eyes darting toward us. I told myself I was just imagining it. After all, why would my own son want to hurt me? But mothers know. Deep inside, I felt the chill of danger. As we reached the cliff, my heart beat faster. The path grew narrow, the drop steep. I clutched George's hand, my legs trembling. Then it happened, the shove, the fall, the pain, the blood. And now here I was lying broken on the rocks, with my husband whispering a secret that cut deeper than the wounds on my body. George coughed, his face pale, his eyes locked on mine. Margaret, I should have told you long ago. Daniel, he's not. Suddenly, we heard voices again. The sound of footsteps moving closer. Daniel and Emily were coming back. The sound of footsteps grew louder. My breath caught in my throat, and I shut my eyes tightly, forcing my chest to rise and fall in shallow, uneven beats, like the weak breaths of someone on the edge of death. George squeezed my hand ever so slightly. A warning. A reminder. Don't move. The crunch of gravel came closer, until I could almost feel their presence above me. Daniel's voice drifted down first, low and sharp. Are you sure they're gone? He asked. Emily's voice followed, dripping with impatience. Look at them, Daniel. They fell hard. No one survives a drop like that. They're finished. And finally, we don't have to worry about them anymore. Her words stabbed deeper than any wound. My own daughter-in-law, the woman I once welcomed into my home, spoke of me as though I was nothing. And my son, my flesh and blood, stood by her side silent. I wanted to scream, to shout his name, to ask him why. But George's grip kept me still. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he spoke, and his voice made my blood run cold. You don't know them like I do, Emily. My parents are tougher than they look. We should check. If one of them is alive. Emily cut him off. Alive or not, no one will believe them if they try to talk. We have everything under control. Let's go. We've wasted enough time here. The footsteps shifted, fading as they moved away again. I dared not open my eyes, dared not breathe too deeply, until the sound of their voices melted into silence. Only then did George release my hand. His face was ashen, his breathing ragged, but his eyes, oh his eyes, were burning with something stronger than fear. Margaret, he whispered, blood on his lips. Listen to me carefully. What I was about to tell you. It's the reason why Daniel and Emily did this. It's the reason we're lying here. I turned my head, forcing myself to stay calm though pain screamed through every bone. Tell me, I whispered back. George swallowed hard. Daniel, he's not the son you think he is. There's more. Something I should have confessed years ago. Something that connects all of this. My heart pounded. I wanted answers, but before George could continue, a sound echoed in the distance. A snapping branch, a rock tumbling down. Someone was still nearby. Watching. Listening. George's eyes widened. We're not safe here. We have to move, Margaret. No matter how much it hurts, we can't stay. I tried to push myself up, but pain ripped through me, white-hot and merciless. My legs refused to move. My chest tightened. I can't, I gasped. George leaned closer. His voice firm despite the blood at his mouth. You must. If we stay, they'll come back. And if they find us breathing, Margaret. His words trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish. I knew exactly what he meant. And that was when I realized, the fall wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. George's hand pressed against mine, firm even though his strength was fading. His voice was hoarse, but there was no mistaking the urgency in it. Margaret, listen to me. If we stay here, Daniel and Emily will come back. They'll make sure we're dead. We have to move. I tried again, forcing my trembling arms to push against the sharp rocks beneath me. Pain shot through my ribs like knives, my vision blurred, and a cry escaped my lips before I could stop it. George leaned over, pressing his hand against my shoulder. Quiet, love. Quiet, he whispered. If they hear us, it's over. For a moment, I just lay there, my body weak, my blood sticky on the stones. I wanted to give up. But then I looked at George. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood. Yet his eyes burned with determination. He had always been the strong one, the one who believed we could survive anything. And I couldn't let him fight alone. "I'll try," I whispered back. It took everything in me to roll onto my side. My leg screamed in protest, sharp pain tearing through my thigh, but somehow, I managed to crawl a few inches. The rocks dug into my palms, tearing my skin, but I kept going. George dragged himself beside me, his movements stiff and broken, every breath a struggle. The cliffside was silent, except for the whisper of wind through the pines above us. I kept expecting to hear footsteps again, to see Daniel's face staring down at me, cold and unforgiving. But all I heard was the rush of my own blood in my ears. We crawled until we found a narrow ledge hidden by brush. George pulled me close, tucking us into the shadows. It wasn't much, but at least it gave us cover. For a while we just sat there, our bodies shaking, breathing shallow. Then George turned his head toward me, his lips pale, his words weak but urgent. "Margaret, I have to tell you the truth now. If something happens to me, you must know." I gripped his hand tighter. "No, George. Don't say if. We'll survive. We'll make it out." But his eyes told me he didn't believe that. Still he pressed on. "Daniel, he isn't the son you think he is. Years ago, before you and I married, I made mistakes. I was with someone else, a woman I shouldn't have been with. And when Daniel was born, He swallowed, his throat tightening. "Margaret, Daniel isn't your son. He isn't even mine." The words crashed over me like another fall. My chest felt heavy, my breath stolen away. I stared at George, unable to speak. What are you saying?" George closed his eyes briefly, then forced them open again. "He's the child of that woman. She tricked me, Margaret. She told me Daniel was mine, but years later, I found out the truth. By then it was too late. You loved him as your own. I didn't have the heart to tell you. I thought we could just raise him and forget the past. I felt dizzy. The boy I had cradled, fed, cared for, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, wasn't even mine? And George had carried this secret for decades? Why now?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why tell me now?" "Because," George said, his jaw tight, "Daniel knows. He found out somehow. And Emily, she's been using it against him. Against us. That's why they pushed us, Margaret. They don't want us alive to reveal the truth. They don't want the past uncovered." My stomach turned. Betrayal upon betrayal. My son, no, not my son, had pushed me to my death. And now this terrible truth explained why. I pressed my hand against my chest, struggling to keep steady. "George, you should have told me." Tears welled in his eyes. "I know. And I'm sorry. But right now, the past doesn't matter. What matters is surviving this moment. If we can get off this mountain, we'll figure out the rest." I nodded, though my heart felt heavy, broken in ways I didn't think could ever heal. We sat in silence for a while, hidden in that ledge. My mind kept replaying Daniel's face, the way he looked at me before the push. There had been no hesitation, no guilt, only cold calculation. But as the silence stretched, another thought clawed at me. If Daniel knew the truth about his bloodline, who really was his father? And what kind of darkness had he inherited? I didn't have time to ask, because just then, we heard a sound that froze us both. A rustle. Not above us this time, but below. George's eyes widened, and he gripped my arm. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward, peeking past the brush. My heart leapt into my throat. There, climbing up the rocks from the ravine, was Emily. Her face was twisted with determination, her hands gripping branches as she pulled herself up. Her eyes scanned the cliff, sharp and hungry. She hadn't left. She had come back. And she was looking for us. George whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't move, Margaret. Don't even breathe." But Emily was getting closer. And the way she was climbing. The fury in her movements. It was clear she wasn't leaving until she was certain we were dead. Emily's fingers clawed at the rocks as she pulled herself higher. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her eyes darting around like a predator closing in on prey. George pressed my hand tightly, signaling me to stay still. My heart pounded so loudly I feared she would hear it echoing off the stone. "Margaret," George whispered so faintly it was barely a breath. "If she finds us, I'll distract her. You stay hidden." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "No. I won't let you face her alone." But there was no time for argument. Emily was only a few feet below now. Her voice carried upward, venomous and mocking. "I know you're alive," she hissed. "I know it. Old people don't die so easily. But don't worry. I'll finish what Daniel started." Her words sliced through me like knives. The daughter-in-law I had once tried to embrace now hunted me like an animal. George shifted slightly, wincing in pain. His body trembled, but his eyes never left Emily. He whispered again, this time more firmly. "When I move, Margaret, crawl away. Don't look back." I wanted to argue, but Emily's hand gripped the ledge below us. She was seconds from pulling herself up. George let go of my hand. For the first time in 50 years, his touch was gone, and I felt a hollowness rush through me. Then, with all the strength he had left, he shoved a loose rock down the slope. The boulder tumbled, crashing against the side of the cliff. Emily cried out, nearly losing her grip, but she clung on, her teeth bared. "There you are," she shouted. Her eyes locked onto ours through the brush, and I knew the hiding was over. George shouted hoarsely, "Run, Margaret!" But I couldn't. My body froze, torn between terror and the thought of leaving him behind. Emily's hand reached higher, her face coming into full view. The hatred in her eyes burned hotter than fire. I knew in that moment, one of us wasn't leaving this mountain alive. Emily's face appeared above the ledge, twisted with a kind of rage that chilled me to the bone. Her hands gripped the rock tightly, her nails dirty and broken from climbing. She heaved herself upward, her body trembling with fury, her eyes blazing with a hunger to finish what she and Daniel had started. George shifted in front of me, shielding me with his body even though he was barely able to stand. His chest rose and fell unevenly, blood darkening his shirt. "Stay back, Emily," George rasped, his voice hoarse but firm. "Leave us alone. You've done enough." Emily let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Done enough? Oh, George, you don't understand. This isn't about enough. This is about making sure the past never comes crawling back to destroy us. Daniel and I have come too far. We've built too much. We're not letting two broken old people ruin it all." Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and unfeeling. "Especially you, Margaret. Always the doting mother, always the saint. You never even knew the truth, did you? You never knew what Daniel really thought of you." I flinched. "He's my son," I whispered, though the words tasted like ash after George's confession. Emily smirked. "Your son? You mean the son who hates you for never being enough? The son who despises you for your weakness? He never loved you, Margaret. He only used you, just like everyone else." Her words struck deep, but I forced myself not to crumble. I couldn't let her see me break. Not now. George took a shaky step forward, raising his arm as if to hold her back. "Stop this, Emily. If you kill us, you'll never wash the blood off your hands. You'll carry it forever." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Oh, don't worry about my hands, George. I've learned how to live with dirty ones." And then she lunged. She came at us with wild strength, her hands reaching for George's throat. Instinct took over. I screamed and grabbed for her wrist, my nails digging into her skin. She hissed and shoved me back, my body slamming against the rocks. Pain exploded through me, but I refused to let go. George stumbled but somehow managed to push Emily off balance. She slipped on the loose gravel, her knee smashing against the ground. For a brief second, I thought she might tumble back down the cliff, but she caught herself, her fingers clawing into the dirt. Her head snapped up, her hair wild, her eyes burning with hatred. "You should have stayed dead," she spat. I tried to crawl closer to George, but Emily was faster. She leapt at him again, this time with both hands, knocking him to the ground. I screamed as his head struck the rock, blood pooling beneath him. "George!" I tried to pull myself toward him, but my leg refused to move, searing pain locking me in place. Emily straddled him, pressing her hands against his throat. George struggled weakly, his face turning red as he gasped for air. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't just watch. With every ounce of strength I had, I reached for a broken branch lying nearby. My fingers closed around it, rough and jagged, and I swung with all my might. The branch struck Emily's shoulder. She cried out, losing her grip for a second, and George sucked in a desperate breath. But she recovered quickly, spinning toward me, her face twisted with pure rage. "You miserable old witch," she snarled. She lunged at me this time, grabbing my hair and yanking hard. Pain seared across my scalp as she dragged me closer to the edge of the ledge. I clawed at her arms, screaming, but she was younger, stronger, and fueled by hate. George tried to rise, blood streaming down his forehead. "Emily, stop!" he roared, his voice raw. He stumbled toward us, but Emily shoved me back against the rocks and whipped her head toward him. "You should have kept your mouth shut, George," she hissed. "If you told Margaret the truth years ago, none of this would be happening. But you had to hide it, didn't you? You had to keep your little secret buried. Well, secrets don't stay buried forever." Her words made my blood run cold. "You knew," I whispered, horrified. "You knew the truth about Daniel all along." Emily smirked, tightening her grip on my arm. "Of course I knew. Why do you think I married him? Daniel isn't just some man. He has bloodlines, power, and a darkness that makes him unstoppable. I wanted that darkness for myself." Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "And I'll kill anyone who threatens to expose it." With a sudden shove, she pushed me backward. My body teetered on the edge of the ledge, the ground vanishing beneath me. For one terrifying second, I thought I was going to fall again. My hands clawed desperately at the rocks, my nails scraping, my heart slamming against my chest. George lunged forward, grabbing my wrist just in time. His grip was weak, slipping, but it was enough to keep me from tumbling into the abyss. "Hold on, Margaret," he shouted, his voice breaking. Emily snarled, raising her foot to stomp on George's hand. But before she could, the sound of movement froze all of us. Voices. Multiple voices. They were coming from above. Men's voices, echoing down the mountain path. "Over here," one shouted. I heard something, down by the rocks. Emily's eyes widened, her face paling for the first time. She whipped her head around, panic flashing across her features. If people found us here, alive, her secret, and Daniel's, would be exposed. She released me, her body trembling with fury. "This isn't over," she spat. "Not by a long shot." And with that, she scrambled up the cliff like a wild animal, vanishing into the trees above just as the voices drew closer. George dragged me fully back onto the ledge, collapsing beside me, both of us gasping for breath. My body shook uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. We were alive, but only just. The sound of boots grew nearer, men calling to one another. Relief should have washed over me, but instead, dread settled heavy in my chest. Because if strangers were coming to find us, there was no telling whether they were here to help, or whether Daniel had sent them to finish the job. The voices grew louder, echoing down the mountain path. George and I lay huddled together, both too weak to move far. My chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, every breath laced with pain. "George," I whispered, "do you think they're here to help?" His hand tightened around mine. His eyes, weary but sharp, shifted toward the slope above. "I don't know, Margaret. But we can't trust too quickly. Not after what just happened." The crunch of boots against gravel drew nearer, until shadows appeared at the edge of the cliff. A group of 3 men peered down at us, their faces blurred by the sunlight overhead. "There," one shouted. "They're alive." Hope flared in me. But just as quickly, suspicion crawled into my heart. Who were they? Hikers? Rangers? Or someone Daniel had sent to clean up what Emily had failed to finish? The tallest of the men began climbing down carefully, his strong hands gripping roots and rocks. "Hang on, we're coming." George's voice was a rasp. "Margaret, don't say a word. Not until we know who they are." I nodded faintly, biting down my fear. The man reached us first, his face now clearer, sunburned, rugged, with kind blue eyes. He crouched low, his hands raised as though to calm frightened animals. "Easy," he said gently. "My name's Patrick. We're hikers." We heard screams. Behind him, the other 2 nodded, their expressions filled with concern rather than malice. Relief swept through me so suddenly I almost wept. These were strangers, not killers. Patrick knelt beside me, his eyes scanning my injuries. You've lost a lot of blood. We need to get you off this mountain fast. George coughed, his voice trembling. Please help her first. But Patrick shook his head. We're helping you both. He signaled to the others and together they began preparing ropes. My body trembled as Patrick spoke calmly, guiding us step by step. For the first time since the fall, I felt a flicker of safety. But even as they worked, I couldn't stop my eyes from darting toward the trees above, where Emily had vanished. She was still out there. And if she had escaped, then Daniel knew by now that we were alive. A shiver ran down my spine. Rescue had found us, but danger hadn't finished hunting. As Patrick fastened the rope around me, he leaned closer and whispered, almost too low to hear. You're lucky we found you first. Another group was coming this way. They didn't look friendly. Patrick's words chilled me more than the wind rushing through the trees. Another group? I whispered, my voice trembling. Who were they? Patrick's gaze flicked upward toward the ridge. His blue eyes were cautious, alert, like a man who had seen danger before. I don't know for certain, but I've been hiking these mountains for years. You can tell when someone's out here for the view, and when someone's out here hunting. These men, they weren't carrying backpacks or gear. They were moving fast, like they had a target. George shifted beside me, his breath shallow. Daniel, he rasped. The name hung in the air like poison. My son, or the man I thought was my son, wasn't done with us. He had sent others. Patrick's companions, two sturdy men named Tom and Michael, worked quickly, securing ropes and harnesses. They moved with practiced efficiency, like people used to emergencies. All right, Tom said, crouching low. We'll get the lady up first. Then we'll come back for you, sir. No, George said firmly, shaking his head. His voice cracked, but his determination was clear. Take her first. I'll follow. Patrick knelt close to him, lowering his voice. You don't look like you've got much time, old man. If we haul her up first and something happens to you. George cut him off. She goes first. His eyes met mine, full of love and fear all at once. I wanted to argue, to insist he be saved before me, but the look on his face silenced me. So I nodded, letting Patrick fasten the rope around my waist. As they prepared to lift me, Patrick leaned closer, his tone urgent. If those men come, you and your husband need to trust me. Do exactly as I say. I nodded again, though my stomach churned with dread. Slowly, carefully, they began hoisting me up the cliff. Every inch was agony, the rope digging into my skin, my ribs screaming with pain, but I held on. I kept my eyes fixed on the sky above, whispering silent prayers with each pull. When I finally reached the top, Michael helped drag me onto solid ground. I lay there gasping, the sky spinning overhead, the taste of blood still sharp in my mouth. Rest, Michael said gently. You're safe now. But I wasn't safe. Not really. Because even as George began his slow ascent, the forest around us grew strangely quiet. The birds stopped singing. The wind stilled. Then, from somewhere in the trees, came the sound of snapping branches. Voices. Low, hushed but growing nearer. Patrick swore under his breath. They're here. Michael's hand went instinctively to the knife strapped at his belt. Tom glanced toward the trail, his jaw tight. I pushed myself onto my elbows, ignoring the fire in my chest. It's them, isn't it? Daniel's men. Patrick didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told me enough. Below, George was still climbing. His movements were slow, his strength failing. Margaret, he called softly. Are you all right? I'm fine. I lied, though my voice shook. Just keep climbing. Patrick crouched low beside me. Listen. If things turn ugly, you crawl into those rocks over there. Stay low. Stay quiet. Understand. I opened my mouth to protest. I couldn't just leave George, but Patrick's expression hardened. If they find you, they'll kill you both. Don't give them that chance. The sound of footsteps grew clearer. Heavy boots crunching against leaves. Laughter, sharp and cruel, slicing through the silence. And then I saw them. 3 men emerged from the trees. They were broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes, their eyes scanning the clearing like hunters searching for prey. One of them carried a metal pipe, another a knife glinting in the sunlight. The third man, tall with a scar running down his cheek, smiled when he spotted me. "Well, well," he drawled. "Looks like we found her." My heart stopped. Patrick rose to his full height, stepping between me and the strangers. "Back off," he barked. "This is none of your business." Scarface tilted his head, smirking. "Oh, it's very much our business. We were sent to make sure those old folks didn't cause any more trouble. You wouldn't happen to be hiding one of them, would you?" Behind him, the man with the pipe grinned, swinging it lazily. "Looks like we won't have to search too hard." Fear clawed at my throat, but Patrick didn't flinch. His body shifted into a fighter stance, calm but ready. "You'll have to go through me first." The men laughed, circling closer. My body trembled as I scrambled back toward the rocks, my hands shaking so badly I could barely crawl. Below, George was only halfway up. He saw the men now, his eyes widening with fear. "Margaret! Don't let them!" His voice cracked, the rest lost in the wind. Patrick's fists clenched. "Stay down, Margaret," he shouted. Then he charged. The clearing exploded into chaos. Patrick slammed into the man with the knife, the two of them tumbling to the ground. Tom swung a branch at the man with the pipe, the crack of wood against metal ringing out. Michael grabbed Scarface, the two men grappling violently near the edge of the cliff. I pressed myself against the rocks, my hands over my mouth to muffle my sobs. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. And then, in the midst of the struggle, Scarface broke free from Michael's grip. His eyes locked on me. "There she is," he snarled. Before I could react, he lunged straight toward me, his knife flashing in the sun. Scarface lunged at me, his knife gleaming as the sunlight caught its edge. My body screamed in pain, but instinct forced me to move. I rolled onto my side, the blade missing me by inches as it sliced into the dirt. He cursed, his teeth bared. "Stop squirming, old woman. This'll be quick." I scrambled backward, my palms tearing against sharp rocks. My chest burned, every breath like fire, but terror kept me moving. He advanced steadily, his knife raised again. Then suddenly, George's voice rang out from below. "Get away from her." I turned just in time to see him, still dangling from the rope, swinging a loose rock he had ripped free from the cliff face. With all his strength, he hurled it upward. The stone struck Scarface's shoulder with a sickening crack. The man staggered, his knife slipping from his hand as he shouted in pain. Patrick seized the moment. He barreled into Scarface, tackling him hard to the ground. The two men rolled across the dirt, fists flying. Tom and Michael still fought the other attackers, the clash of wood, metal, and shouts filling the clearing. I gasped, my heart slamming against my ribs. For one fleeting second, hope flared. We might survive this. But then Scarface twisted, pulling a second blade from his boot. His arm slashed upward, and Patrick cried out, blood spraying across the dirt. "Patrick!" Michael shouted. Patrick collapsed to one knee, clutching his side. Scarface grinned through bloodied teeth, his knife poised for the kill. I froze, torn between terror and the desperate urge to help. My body was weak, broken. But something inside me refused to let another life be lost for my sake. My eyes darted to the ground, searching desperately. There it was, the first knife Scarface had dropped. With trembling hands, I lunged forward and snatched it up. My fingers closed around the hilt, heavy and foreign. My body shook as I raised it, the blade wobbling in my grip. "Leave him alone," I screamed. Scarface turned, his eyes narrowing at me. He laughed, cruel and sharp. "You? With that knife? You wouldn't even know how to use it." But I did. Or at least I would try. I tightened my grip, my heart pounding, my body quivering. My whole life I had been a teacher, a wife, a mother. Never a fighter. But here on this mountain, none of that mattered. Survival did. Scarface stepped toward me, his smile wicked. "Go on then, Grandma. Do it. Let's see what you've got." I raised the knife higher, my hand shaking. My knees wobbled, but I held my ground. And then before I could strike, another voice cut through the chaos. A voice I knew. A voice that made my blood run cold. "Mother." I turned slowly. Standing at the edge of the clearing, calm and collected, was Daniel, my son, watching everything. "Mother." The word slid from Daniel's mouth like ice water running down my spine. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his figure framed by the trees, calm and composed in a way that chilled me more than Emily's fury or Scarface's blade. His dark jacket was spotless, his hair neatly combed, his shoes unscuffed, so different from the chaos around us. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Patrick clutched his bleeding side. Tom and Michael struggled against their attackers. George dangled halfway up the rope, straining for breath. And I, still holding Scarface's knife, my arm trembling, felt my whole world collapse into that single word he had spoken. Mother. I stared at him, searching his face for some trace of the boy I had raised, the child I had once rocked to sleep, the young man I had prayed over every night. But his eyes, they were cold, empty. Daniel, I whispered, my voice cracking. Scarface chuckled, wiping blood from his mouth. Told you we'd find her, he muttered to Daniel. Daniel's eyes flicked toward him, and with a single sharp nod, Scarface fell silent. The power my son commanded over these men was undeniable. George's voice, weak but desperate, called from the cliff below. Daniel, stop this madness. Daniel tilted his head, gazing down at his father, or the man he thought was his father. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Madness? No, father. This isn't madness. This is control. Order. You should have taught me that instead of feeding me lies all my life. The word lies stabbed at me. My chest tightened. He knew. He knew the truth George had confessed only moments ago. Daniel, I began, my hands trembling around the knife. Please, let's just go home. We can talk. Home. Daniel barked out a laugh. There is no home. Not anymore. You had your chance, Mother. Both of you did. And you wasted it. Do you think you can erase years of betrayal with a single conversation? My throat closed. Betrayal? He spoke as though we had wronged him. Scarface, emboldened by Daniel's presence, lunged forward suddenly, yanking the knife from my trembling hand. I gasped, stumbling back, my body slamming against the rocks. He shoved me to the ground, pressing the blade against my throat. Daniel stepped closer, his voice calm, almost tender. Don't struggle, Mother. It will be quick. Cleaner than the fall. Tears burned in my eyes. Daniel, I loved you. Every day of your life, I loved you. For the first time, his expression faltered. His eyes flickered with something, pain? Doubt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He shook his head. Love doesn't erase blood. And I know now whose blood runs in me. George groaned from the rope, his voice strained. Daniel, listen to me. Your real father. He was no man to admire. That darkness you cling to, it will destroy you. Daniel's eyes snapped back to George, fury flashing. Don't you dare speak of him. You stole my life, George. You raised me in ignorance, made me believe I was yours. You built my whole world on lies. His words echoed across the clearing, heavy and sharp. I felt my heart splinter. He wasn't just angry, he was consumed. Patrick, clutching his wound, forced himself upright. Daniel, he gasped, you don't have to do this. Walk away. Whatever your past, it doesn't have to define you. Daniel turned slowly toward him, his expression darkening. And who are you? Another fool trying to stand in my way. With a flick of his hand, he signaled Scarface. The knife lifted from my throat and swung toward Patrick. No, I screamed. But before Scarface could strike, Tom tackled him from the side, both men crashing hard against the ground. The knife skittered away, spinning into the dirt. Chaos erupted again. Michael grabbed one of the other attackers, slamming him against a tree. Patrick staggered but managed to throw a punch, his face twisted in determination. And through it all, Daniel stood still, watching, calculating. I crawled toward George's rope, desperate to reach him, desperate to cling to something solid. Daniel, please. I begged, my voice hoarse. You don't have to be like him. You can choose differently. You can still be my son. For a heartbeat, silence. Daniel's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between me and George. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Then slowly he shook his head. You're not my mother. You never were. And he pointed at George, his voice low and venomous, is not my father. I don't need either of you. The words pierced me deeper than any knife. Scarface broke free from Tom's grip, staggering upright with the knife again. He raised it high, his eyes blazing with hatred. This ends now. But before he could strike, a deafening sound split the air. Bang! Scarface froze, his eyes wide. Blood blossomed across his chest. The knife slipped from his hand, clattering against the rocks. Slowly he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Everyone went still. My heart raced as I turned toward the source of the sound. Standing on the ridge, a gun smoking in her hand, was Emily. Her hair was wild, her clothes torn from the climb, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. She stepped forward, her voice ringing clear across the clearing. "You really thought you could finish this without me, Daniel?" The clearing fell into stunned silence. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath as Emily stepped forward, her gun steady in her hands. She looked different, harder, fiercer. The woman who had once been my daughter-in-law now stood like a predator reclaiming her ground. Her eyes flicked briefly to me, but there was no softness in them, only ice. "Emily," I whispered. She ignored me, turning her gaze on Daniel. "You were supposed to wait for me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You were taking too long." "I don't need you." Emily smirked, raising the gun slightly, the barrel glinting. "Oh, you'll need me. Don't forget, Daniel, I know everything. And unlike you, I don't hesitate." Scarface's body lay crumpled on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Tom and Michael froze, Patrick swayed where he stood, clutching his wound. Even George, still dangling from the rope, stared up with wide, horrified eyes. "Emily," I said again, my voice trembling. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Finally she looked at me. For a split second, something human flickered in her eyes, bitterness, maybe even pain. "Because you ruined everything," she spat. "You and your perfect little family. You thought I wasn't good enough for your son. You whispered, judged, pushed me out. Well, now you'll see what being on the outside really feels like." Her words cut deep, though I knew they weren't the whole truth. This wasn't just anger, it was vengeance. Daniel stepped closer to her, his expression unreadable. "Put the gun down," he said softly. Emily laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "What? Afraid I'll outshine you?" "You're reckless," Daniel hissed. "Always have been." Their eyes locked, a storm brewing between them. And I realized something horrifying: they weren't allies anymore. They were rivals. Emily tilted her head, smirking. "Maybe. But unlike you, I'm not afraid to pull the trigger again." Her finger tightened on the gun. In that frozen second, everything seemed to collapse around me. My son consumed by darkness, my daughter-in-law twisted by spite, my husband hanging on by a thread, strangers bleeding and fighting to save us. And then Emily's voice rang out, sharp and final. "Only one of us walks away." She raised the gun, aiming straight at Daniel. Emily's arm was steady, her finger curled tight around the trigger. Her whole body hummed with tension, like a bowstring pulled to its limit. Daniel didn't flinch. He stood calmly, eyes fixed on her, his hands at his sides. "You won't shoot me," he said quietly. Emily's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Want to test that theory?" The gun wavered for a fraction of a second, then steadied again. Everyone in the clearing seemed to hold their breath. Tom, Michael, and Patrick frozen in place, George dangling from the rope, and me crouched by the rocks, my heart hammering like it might explode. Daniel tilted his head, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "If you kill me, Emily, you lose everything. Who will protect you then? Who will lead you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Protect me? You've been using me. From the start. Every scheme, every plan, it was always about you. I see that now." "Don't be foolish," Daniel said. His voice lowered, coaxing, as though speaking to a child. "You're nothing without me. Just a bitter woman with a grudge. Do you really think you can finish this on your own?" The words struck her, I could tell. For just a moment, her confidence cracked, doubt flickering across her face. I found my voice thin and trembling. "Emily, don't do this. Please. We can all walk away. No more blood, no more pain." She snapped her gaze to me, fury igniting in her eyes. "You stay out of this, Margaret. You've meddled enough." Daniel seized the moment. He lunged forward, closing the distance between them in 2 swift strides. His hand shot out, grabbing the gun. A struggle erupted. the weapon jerking wildly between them. Emily snarled, Daniel gritted his teeth, and the two locked in a deadly dance of strength and desperation. Let go! Emily shrieked. Not a chance, Daniel growled. The gun went off. Bang! The shot echoed through the clearing, deafening, birds scattering from the trees. I screamed. George shouted from below. Patrick staggered toward them despite his wound. Tom and Michael froze, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then I saw it. The blood blooming across Daniel's shoulder. His face twisted in pain as he stumbled back, releasing the gun. Emily gasped, staring at the weapon still smoking in her hand. Her lips parted, her expression one of shock, but only for a second. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. Well, she said softly, looks like I can pull the trigger after all. Daniel clutched his wound, glaring at her with hatred so sharp it seemed to cut the air. You'll regret this, he hissed. Emily raised the gun again, her confidence surging. No, Daniel. I think you will. Before she could fire a second time, Patrick lunged forward with a cry, slamming into her side. The gun went flying, spinning across the dirt and landing near the cliff's edge. I scrambled toward it, my ribs screaming with every movement. My fingers stretched, desperate to reach it. But Emily recovered quickly. She shoved Patrick aside and raced for the gun at the same time I did. Our eyes locked, both of us crawling, grasping, clawing across the ground. My hand brushed the cold metal just as hers did. We grappled, the weapon sliding between us, our fingers tangling in a frantic tug of war. You don't deserve to live, she hissed, her face inches from mine. You should have stayed down there. Both of you. Her strength was greater, fueled by rage, but I clung to the gun with everything I had. My knuckles turned white, my breath ragged. I will not let you take my family. George shouted from the rope, his voice raw with desperation. Margaret! Hold on. Emily wrenched the gun free, her knee driving into my stomach. I cried out, the breath knocked from me. She rose to her feet, the weapon in her grasp once more. She turned, aiming, not at me, but at George. No. I screamed. George's eyes widened, his grip faltering. Dangling helplessly, he was an easy target. Emily's finger tightened on the trigger. Goodbye, old man. Another bang. Split the air. But it wasn't Emily's gun. She staggered, her eyes wide, blood blooming across her chest. The weapon slipped from her grasp, clattering to the ground. Slowly, she turned, her expression one of disbelief. Standing behind her, holding a pistol steady with both trembling hands, was Daniel. He had shot her. Emily collapsed to her knees, then crumpled face first onto the dirt, unmoving. Silence fell again, broken only by the ragged breaths of the living. I stared at Daniel, my mind reeling. He was bleeding, pale, yet his grip on the pistol was firm. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw not just anger, but something darker. Do you see, Mother? He said quietly. I win. Always. Then, without warning, he turned the gun, aiming it straight at George, still dangling from the rope. My scream tore from my throat. Daniel, no. The world seemed to tilt, everything spinning, collapsing toward that single moment, that single aim. And Daniel's finger began to squeeze the trigger. Daniel's finger curled tighter on the trigger. Time seemed to slow, the air heavy, every heartbeat thunderous in my ears. Don't! I screamed, throwing myself forward. At that exact moment, Patrick, bleeding, barely standing, hurled himself at Daniel. The two collided hard, the gun discharging with a deafening bang. The rope holding George jerked violently as the bullet tore past, grazing the cliffside inches from his head. Pebbles rained down as George cried out, clinging desperately. Daniel and Patrick crashed to the ground, the gun skittering away into the underbrush. Daniel snarled, his face twisted with fury, striking Patrick across the jaw. Patrick groaned but held on, fighting with everything left in him. I scrambled toward George, my heart in my throat. Hold on. Just hold on. I cried, reaching the rope, pulling with all my strength. My body screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. Above me, Daniel shoved Patrick aside and lunged for the gun. Michael intercepted him, tackling him to the ground, both men grappling viciously. Tom rushed to help, his fists pounding against Daniel's back. Daniel fought like a wild animal, his rage fueling him. "You can't stop me," he roared. "He doesn't deserve to live." George groaned from below, his grip slipping. "Margaret! No!" I sobbed, gripping the rope tighter, digging my heels into the dirt. "You're not falling. Not now, not ever." The struggle behind me grew louder, grunts, curses, the crack of fists against flesh. But all I could focus on was George's trembling hands, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "Almost there," I whispered, my tears falling. "Almost." With one last pull, Tom and Michael managed to drag Daniel back, pinning his arms. The gun lay forgotten in the dirt. For the first time, Daniel seemed vulnerable, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. And George, inch by inch, was lifted higher, until at last his hands reached the edge. I grabbed him, sobbing with relief, hauling him onto the ground beside me. He collapsed into my arms, his body weak, his breath ragged. "We made it," I whispered, holding him close. "We're alive." But even as I spoke the words, a terrible truth settled in my chest. Daniel was still here, still breathing, still dangerous. Pinned beneath Tom and Michael, his lips curled into a cold, bloody smile. "This isn't over. You can chain me, beat me, bury me, but I'll always come back. You'll never escape me." His voice slithered into my bones, and I shivered, clutching George tighter, because deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. Daniel's smile chilled me to the bone. Even pinned under Tom and Michael's weight, with Patrick swaying on his feet and blood pouring from his shoulder, Daniel radiated power. His eyes, sharp, unyielding, made it clear he wasn't finished. "You think ropes can hold me?" he hissed, struggling against their grip. "You think this is the end? You don't know me at all." "Shut up," Michael snapped, tightening his hold. But Daniel only laughed, low and bitter. "You're wasting your strength. The police, the law, chains, they mean nothing. I'll always find a way. I'm not like you, weak, clinging to scraps of hope." George coughed beside me, his voice hoarse. "Daniel, please. This path you're on, it will destroy you." Daniel's gaze snapped to him, his expression twisting. "Destroy me? No. It will free me. Don't you understand? You kept me caged my whole life. Fed me lies. Made me believe I was your son. But I'm not yours. I'm stronger than you'll ever be." His words stabbed deep, though I saw George's eyes harden with grief, not anger. "Strength isn't cruelty, Daniel," George said softly. "It's sacrifice. It's love. But you wouldn't know that. You've rejected both." Daniel spat at the ground, his face twisting. "Save your lectures for the grave." Patrick staggered closer, wincing from his wound but unwilling to back down. "Enough," he said firmly. "Tie him up. We're taking him down the mountain." Michael and Tom exchanged a glance, then began binding Daniel's wrists with thick rope. He fought viciously, snarling, thrashing like a cornered animal. But the more he resisted, the tighter they pulled, until finally his arms were pinned behind his back, his ankles lashed together. Still, his eyes never wavered. They burned into me, cold and unforgiving. "You'll regret this, Mother," he said quietly. "You chose him over me. You always did. And now when you look at him, you'll think of me. You'll think of the blood on your hands." Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to speak. "Daniel, I never stopped loving you. But love isn't blind. And I can't let you destroy everything." For a moment something flickered in his eyes, pain perhaps or doubt. But then his face hardened again, the wall slamming back into place. Patrick pressed a hand to his bleeding side, his voice firm despite his pallor. "We need to move. If more of his men are out here, they'll come looking." Michael nodded, hauling Daniel roughly to his feet. Tom took the other side, gripping him tightly. We began the slow, painful descent down the mountain. Every step was agony for George, whose legs trembled with weakness, and for me whose ribs ached with every breath. Patrick leaned heavily on Tom at times, his wound worsening. Yet we pressed on, driven by the desperate need to leave the cliff, and the memories of what had nearly happened behind. The forest thickened around us, shadows stretching long in the late afternoon light. Birds called again, distant and cautious, as though sensing the danger still lingering in our group. Daniel remained silent for a time, his head bowed. but I could feel his gaze flicking toward me, sharp as knives. He was thinking, plotting. At last he spoke, his voice calm, almost conversational. Do you want to know why Emily turned on me? Patrick stiffened. Quiet. But Daniel continued, ignoring him. His words curled through the air like smoke. She discovered something. Something I hadn't told her. About you, Mother. My breath caught. What are you talking about? His lips curved into a smile. Emily was clever. Jealous, yes, but clever. She found letters, old ones, hidden away in the attic. From him. My real father. The man you tried to erase. The world tilted beneath me. Letters? George's hand gripped mine tightly, as though steadying me. Daniel's eyes glinted. She read every word. She knew the truth before you ever admitted it. That's why she hated you, Mother. Not because of whispers, not because of judgments, because she saw what you'd hidden. And she knew I deserved to know too. A tremor ran through me. The truth I had fought so hard to bury, clawing its way to the surface. George's face was pale, his jaw clenched. Daniel, your real father was not a man to honor. He was cruel. Dangerous. We wanted to protect you. Protect me? Daniel laughed bitterly. By feeding me lies? By raising me like a lamb while my true blood ran wild in my veins? No, you didn't protect me. You caged me. And now I've broken free. Michael shoved him forward, his patience thinning. Enough. Keep moving. Daniel stumbled but regained his balance, his eyes never leaving mine. Emily thought she could use that truth to control me. But she underestimated me. Everyone does. His words echoed in my mind long after he fell silent. Letters. Proof. Buried pieces of a past I had hoped would never return. We trudged on. The forest growing darker as the sun sank behind the peaks. My body ached, my spirit trembled, but I clung to George's arm, guiding him carefully over roots and rocks. Then suddenly a sound split the stillness. A howl. Long, low, and chilling, carried through the trees. We froze. That wasn't a wolf, Patrick muttered, his voice tight. That was a signal. Daniel's smile widened. His teeth gleamed in the fading light. They're coming. And from the shadows ahead, figures began to emerge. Men. At least 5 of them, their faces hard, their movements swift. Each carried something, pipes, blades, ropes. Their eyes locked onto us, predatory and eager. My stomach dropped. We were surrounded. The forest closed in around us, thick with shadows and menace. 5 men stepped from the trees, their weapons glinting in the fading light. My breath caught in my throat. Patrick staggered forward, planting himself between us and the strangers. His voice was steady, though his body shook. Stay back. One of the men sneered. Orders are orders. We take the old man and the woman. The rest of you can die where you stand. My knees buckled. They wanted us. George and me. Daniel laughed softly, his voice carrying an eerie calm. Told you. You can't stop what's coming. Michael tightened his grip on Daniel's ropes. Shut your mouth. The men advanced, spreading out in a half circle. Tom raised a branch like a club, Michael readied his knife, and Patrick, though pale and bleeding, clenched his fists. George, I whispered, clutching his arm. Stay behind me. He shook his head weakly. No, Margaret. If this is it, we face it together. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar across his forehead, stepped closer. His voice was low, deliberate. Hand them over. Now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. No one moved. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then Patrick growled. If you want them, you'll have to go through us. The clearing exploded into chaos. The men charged. Patrick swung wildly, his fist connecting with one attacker's jaw. Tom cracked his branch across another's shoulder. Michael slashed at a third, steel flashing in the dim light. I screamed, dragging George backward, our feet stumbling across the uneven ground. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, bound but smiling, his eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. This is just the beginning, he whispered, his voice carrying even through the noise. A hand grabbed my arm, rough, strong. I gasped as one of the attackers yanked me away from George. Margaret! George cried, reaching for me. The man pulled me hard, his blade glinting as he raised it. My body froze, terror locking every muscle. And then out of nowhere, a gunshot cracked through the trees. The attacker's eyes widened. He crumpled to the ground at my feet, blood blooming across his chest. I stumbled back, gasping as everyone froze. From the ridge above, a shadowy figure lowered a smoking rifle. I couldn't see his face, only the shape of him against the twilight sky. Whoever he was, he had just changed everything. The gunshot still echoed in the mountains when silence fell. Everyone froze. The attackers, Patrick swaying on his feet, Michael and Tom gripping their weapons, George slumped against a tree, gasping for breath. And me. My chest heaved, my body trembling. I stared at the ridge where the shadowy figure stood, rifle lowered, smoke drifting from its barrel. The stranger's voice boomed down the slope. Step away from the old woman. The attackers glanced at one another, uncertain. The leader with the scar snarled but held up his hand, signaling the others to pause. Daniel, still bound, threw back his head and laughed. Oh, this just keeps getting better. The figure began to descend. Branches cracked under his boots as he moved with measured steps, his rifle steady in his arms. As he drew closer, the fading light revealed his face, weathered, lined with age but unmistakably familiar. My breath caught. It was Samuel, the man George had confessed about, the man who was Daniel's real father. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. No, it can't be. George's face drained of color. His lips parted but no words came. Samuel's gaze swept over the scene, the tied-up son, the bloodied bodies, the scattered weapons, before settling on me. His eyes were piercing, sharp, and when he spoke, his voice was steady, commanding. Margaret, after all these years we meet again. My knees threatened to give way. The past I had buried, the secret I had kept, now stood before me in flesh and blood. George forced himself upright, though his body trembled. Samuel, stay back. This isn't your place anymore. Samuel's lip curled. Not my place? That boy, he jabbed a finger toward Daniel, is my blood. And you thought you could steal him from me? Raise him as your own? You think truth can stay buried forever? Daniel's eyes lit with something dangerous, recognition, validation. You came, he whispered, almost reverently. Samuel nodded. Of course I came. I've watched from a distance all these years, waiting for the moment you'd see who you really are. His voice dropped, cold and certain. My son. The world tilted. The men who had surrounded us straightened, their expressions shifting from confusion to obedience. Scarman gave a curt nod. Boss. So that was it. Samuel wasn't just Daniel's father. He was the leader of them all. My stomach turned to ice. Patrick swayed but planted himself in front of me. His fists clenched. I don't care who you are. You're not taking them. Samuel raised the rifle, leveling it at Patrick. You're already half dead, boy. Don't test me. My heart raced. Every choice, every mistake, every buried truth had led us here. To this clearing, this moment. My son tied and bleeding, my husband collapsing, my daughter-in-law dead. And the man I had once loved pointing a gun at the stranger who had saved me. Please, I whispered, stepping forward despite my trembling legs. Samuel, don't do this. Let him go. Let us go. His eyes softened for just a heartbeat, old memories flickering. But then they hardened. No. This is how it was meant to be. The boy comes with me. You. His eyes raked over me, bitter. You've done enough damage. Daniel straightened, a grim smile spreading across his face. Finally, the truth is mine. I am not his son. He spat the words at George, his voice dripping with venom. I am yours. The air crackled with tension, every soul in the clearing hanging on the knife edge of violence. Then, in a voice raw with desperation, George stepped forward. No, Daniel. Listen to me. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does. And love is what raised you even when you turned away. Whatever Samuel gave you, whatever lies he fed you, it wasn't love. It was poison. Daniel's eyes flicked between the two men. His blood father and the man who had raised him. Conflict churned across his face, fury battling with something deeper, something fragile. Samuel snarled. Don't listen to him. Weakness disguised as love is still weakness. You are mine, Daniel. You always will be. Silence stretched. Daniel's chest heaved, his lips parting as if to speak. And then, without warning, he lunged. Not at George. Not at me. At Samuel. Bound though he was, Daniel slammed into his father, knocking the rifle aside. The gun went off, the bullet ripping into a tree. Shouts erupted, chaos spilling across the clearing again. Michael and Tom dove forward, grabbing the other attackers before they could react. Patrick stumbled but threw himself towards Samuel. I dropped to my knees beside George, shielding him with my body. Samuel roared, shoving Daniel back. Ungrateful wretch. After everything. Daniel spat blood, his eyes blazing. I'm not yours. Not anymore. The men fought viciously, rolling across the dirt, snarling and striking like wild animals. Samuel's hands wrapped around Daniel's throat, squeezing, his face twisted with rage. My scream tore through the clearing. Stop! In that instant, George moved. Summoning strength from some hidden reserve, he dragged himself across the ground, his hand closing around the fallen rifle. With shaking arms, he aimed it at Samuel. Let him go. George's voice cracked with fury. Samuel froze, his grip tightening on Daniel's neck. His eyes flicked to George, disdainful. You don't have the strength. George's hands trembled, but his finger curled on the trigger. Bang! The shot echoed. Samuel staggered back, clutching his shoulder, blood spilling between his fingers. His face twisted with shock and rage as he stumbled into the shadows of the trees. His men, seeing their leader wounded, faltered. Some fled. Others fought half-heartedly before being overpowered by Tom and Michael. And Daniel, gasping, coughing, his throat red and raw, collapsed onto the dirt, his chest heaving. I rushed to him, tears streaming down my face. Daniel! His eyes fluttered open, filled with pain and something else. Regret. Mother! He croaked, his voice barely audible. I pressed my hand to his cheek, sobbing. I'm here. I'm here. George collapsed beside me, his strength spent, but his eyes fixed on Daniel. Son, he whispered. Come back to us. For the first time, Daniel didn't pull away. He closed his eyes, his lips trembling, as though surrendering. Not to Samuel, not to rage, but to something he had buried long ago. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Patrick had managed to call for help. Soon police would arrive. But in that clearing, with the scent of blood and gunpowder hanging heavy, all that mattered was the fragile thread binding us together. Love, forgiveness, the chance of redemption. I held George with one arm, Daniel with the other, my tears falling freely. And I realized the lesson carved into my heart, written in blood and sacrifice. Family is not perfect. Family is not blood alone. Family is who fights for you, who refuses to let go even when you fall. We had fallen. But together, we had also risen. Later, after the police came, after Samuel's men were dragged away and Samuel himself vanished into the forest with a wound that might, or might not, end him, I stood at the base of the mountain, staring at the sky. Daniel sat nearby, his wrists no longer bound, his eyes distant but softened. George rested against me, pale but alive. Patrick was rushed to the hospital, Tom and Michael giving their statements. The nightmare was not over. Healing would take time. But we had survived. And survival meant hope. I turned to the camera of my heart, to the listeners of my story, and whispered, my name is Margaret. I'm 70 years old, speaking from the mountains of Colorado. If you followed me through this journey, if you felt the fear and the fight in my words, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notification button. And tell me, from which part of the country are you watching? I want to know where my story has reached. Because stories bind us. And even in the darkest valleys, we rise when we rise together.